Hey everybody, welcome to a bit of a different video today. This is a new series I'm starting. Basically, I'm going to be pulling a random record from my vinyl collection, listening to it front to back, and then interviewing people involved in the record or connected to it to learn more about its history and impact on the world. This is something I've been really excited to start because one of the most important qualities I feel as a mastering engineer is understanding and appreciating what a finished record sounds like, and you can't really do that without listening. Today, I just so happened to pull Four Freshmen and Five Trombones, the sophomore record by the classic jazz vocal group, the Four Freshmen. So we're going to be interviewing their resident historian, Christian Rank, and one of their current members, Bob Ferreira. And let's get into it. I'm so excited.
Well, my name is Christian Rank. I'm considered to be the official historian of the Four Freshmen Society, which is the worldwide fan club of the Four Freshmen. My love of the Four Freshmen and their sound goes back probably 50 years. My parents were big fans and had a few of their albums in their collection, including the one that we're going to be talking about. And I saw them live for the first time in 1985 when Bob Flanagan was still touring with them.
Amazing.
And I've seen them probably since then, probably 100 different times throughout the years.
Wow. How did you become the resident historian, and what is the Four Freshmen Society?
Well, the Four Freshmen Society is a fan club that got started in 1988, and I joined it in 1991. At its peak, which was probably in the late 90s, I think we had about 3,000, 4,000 members worldwide.
Now that we kind of have a background on you and the Four Freshmen Society, how did the Four Freshmen start?
Well, they started in Indiana. Their first professional gig was in 1948. They all attended the Butler University, Arthur Jordan Conservatory of Music at Butler University in Indianapolis, Indiana. The four original members are all from Indiana. They included brothers Don and Ross Barber, originally from Columbus, their cousin Bob Flanagan from Greencastle, and their friend Hal Cratch, who hailed from Warsaw, Indiana. And they had their first professional gig on September 20th, 1948 at the Club 113 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They got signed to Capitol Records in 1950 when the renowned band leader Stan Kenton heard them at the Esquire Lounge in Dayton, Ohio. And their first two singles were released in 1950. They didn't sell well, and the label dropped them. But the Freshmen did record another session at Capitol that they didn't release. But the song, It's a Blue World, by the way, they were performing in clubs throughout the Midwest, and it was Detroit-based disc jockey Bob Murphy who got an acetate of the record, and it was being heard on the airwaves, and the response was overwhelming that Capitol decided to give the Freshmen another chance, re-signed the group, It's a Blue World, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Is that what sort of then led into and funded sort of the recording of this record?
Yeah, this album came in 1955, and before that they had a couple more hits before this album was recorded. After Blue World, they had Point Siena, The Day Isn't Long Enough, in This Whole Wide World. Then they recorded their first album, which was called Voices in Modern. It was a 10-inch album that came out in 1954, and Five Trombones is their second album.
Cool. Okay. Amazing. And so I know, and I'm wondering, so I was doing a little bit of research into Stan Kenton, and I know the arranger for this record, Pete Rugolo, had played in his orchestra. So I'm wondering, I mean, I know Pete was also, an A&R and arranger producer for Capitol at this time. So was it sort of Stan that influenced Pete joining in on this project and becoming the arranger for the Four Freshmen, Five Trombones record, or was this a Capitol decision?
Yeah, in a way, Pete Rugolo, yeah, he was briefly an A&R man for Capitol. He
Mm.
arranged some sides for Nat King Cole, including his recording of Lush Life, which I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
Yeah,
It
amazing.
was
Yeah.
Pete Rugolo actually produced the Freshmen's audition for Capitol, and they recorded 5 songs, and that led Capitol to signing them. Pete Rugolo, joined the Kenton organization a few years earlier, I believe around 1947, I believe,
Mm.
and he he, he stayed with Kenton up through the 50s, and he would occasionally arrange album projects for Kenton into the 1960s. And the Freshmen and Pete Rugolo have, a long association. Besides 5 Trombones, he also arranged about 4 or 5 other albums for the group.
Moving into the record, do you know, because I've been having trouble finding any sort of crediting for production or engineering on that. Do you know who was involved with that record?
According to my research, the producer of a lot of the Freshmen's Capitol albums was a gentleman named Boyle Gilmore.
Okay.
And then later, towards the end of the 50s and into the 60s, a gentleman named Bill Miller started producing
Yeah.
their albums.
Okay. I found Bill, but I
And
wasn't sure. Yeah.
engineering is probably done by a guy named John Palladino. I know he engineered a lot of the Freshmen's, later albums. He did the engineering for a live album that they did with Stan Kenton and June Christie called Roadshow, which was recorded live through Universal in 1959. So I'm assuming, but I'm not 100% positive that he did the engineering for the 5.
Moving into the sort of recording of the album, do you know anything about sort of, I'm assuming it was done at Capitol Studios, and do you know anything about what that process was like, or how long they were in the studio, or what the sort of workflow looked like?
Well, the album itself was recorded in 4 sessions in August of 1955, August 17th, 22nd, 23rd, and 29th of 1955. The first session, they only got one completed master. Love Is Just Around the Corner. Then the others, they had 3 and 4, mastered songs for a total of 12 in the final product.
Do you know what was sort of involved with the song choice on the album? Because looking through the songs on the record, I know it was pretty standard at the time, of course, that maybe it wasn't really a whole lot of originals. It was more so just pulling from other older pop songs, or kind of the American songbook and whatnot. Yeah, standards, exactly. So what do you know if there was, was it sort of the band saying, oh man, these are some of our favorite standards that we want to put together, or was it perhaps a production
I would
decision?
imagine, the Freshmen had some say in some of the songs, as well as Pete Rugolo. And of the 12 songs at the time, the newest one was probably Angel Eyes, which at the time was probably a couple years old. It was introduced. It was actually first recorded by Nat King Cole a couple years earlier in 1953 with the Billy May arrangement.
Oh wow, okay.
And of course, it later became a standard in Sinatra's.
I want to know if you have any sort of commentary on any of the musicians involved, because it was so interesting looking into their stories. I mean, there was some standouts for me where there's the trombone player Frank Rosolino was
Yes.
Yeah, was so involved with so many people.
Yeah, he was a Stan Kenton alumni.
Mm-hmm.
A very, very, very good player. Very interesting life. And
yes.
The other ones.
This is a quick aside here, but look into Frank's history if you're interested. Pretty sad at the end of his life, as you'll maybe read if you check out his Wikipedia page, but very, very interesting person.
I believe all 5 of them at one time were Kenton alumni. Milt Bernhardt, one of the players, he has an interesting Freshman connection. He plays a trombone solo on the Freshmen's recording of Day by Day, which is one of their signature songs.
Oh, wow.
And many people assume that solo on that record was played by Bob Flanagan, but it wasn't. However, Bob Flanagan, of course, played that solo every time they did the song in concert. So that's a misconception. Everyone thinks that Flanagan did the solo on the record, but that's not true. And in fact, in an unrelated Freshman anecdote, Milt Bernhardt also played the trombone solo on Sinatra's legendary recording of "I've Got You Under My Skin" with Nelson
Mm.
Riddle. Just a little,
Yeah.
side note there, but very versatile, very active in the studio scene.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is a lot of these music. I mean, the bassist Joe Mondragon, I know he played on Come Fly With Me by Frank Sinatra, or he also played on Astrid Gilberto's sort of, solo record that was her sort of breakout hit as well. What I really enjoy about this album is it's sort of that synthesis where they sort of take that emotion of longing from the sort of World War II big band stuff and translate it into sort of the West Coast jazz and cool jazz sort of arrangement and feel. And I think that that band is such a huge part of that sound because they were so involved in playing with all the
Rhythm
greats of that
section
time.
was a big part of the West Coast jazz scene, and a lot of the musicians played in the Lighthouse All Stars. I mean, Frank Rossellino plays on, of course, Shelly Mann's been on probably more sessions than anybody could possibly count.
Yeah.
Claude Williamson, he did a couple trio dates for Capitol Records under the subgenre Kenton Presents Jazz. Kenton had his own series of albums, Kenton Presents Jazz. In fact, Frank Rossellino recorded with his group. Claude Williamson did a few, Bob Cooper, and then Barney Kessel, the guitarist.
Oh yeah, I'm a guitarist first and foremost, and outside of mastering is my career, but I kind of came up as a musician first, and guitar is my primary instrument, and Barney was the first name that struck out to me. And part of me wonders, like, either how much his sort of playing influenced Pete's arranging or vice versa, because when I hear their voices, it's so much like a kind of chord melody jazz guitar arrangement in a way where it blends so together. This record has sort of stood the test of time for a lot of people, because of the fact that Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, cites it as such a huge influence. And it's so funny because Barney Kessel ended up playing guitar on Pet Sounds for Brian. So it's kind of funny seeing that sort of transition, and Brian ended up kind of like taking some of his favorite elements in so many different ways from that record. And I'm sort of curious, do you have any favorite tracks on that album specifically?
Well, I like quite a few. I like the closing track, "Guilty." I also like "You Made Me Love You." In fact, they mentioned Pete Rugolo in that particular, if you've listened to it recently.
You know you made me love you. Pete Rugolo.
I love when they kind of add in little nuggets like that to kind of pay homage to people involved. And yeah, I found my favorite sort of tracks were Our Love Is Here to Stay, Mamzelle, and I Remember You Stepped Out of a Dream. To me, those three kind of like really encapsulate what I was talking about earlier, where it's this sort of very unique vocal arrangement at the time that it's sort of such a climax of pop music, in like jazz influenced pop music at that time, because immediately after that era, getting into 1959, I mean, then rock and roll exploded, and vocals kind of moved away from that, at least in the mainstream. So it's really impressive to see these like big, thick sort of like 9th and 11th chord extensions in pop music, and staying in that sort of easy to listen to sort of vibe. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you for sharing what you really enjoyed out of that album. It's so interesting to me the impact this record has had, because again, it started as sort of perhaps a big pop hit of the day, where it kind of opened people more up to more sophisticated jazz vocabulary, and then the influence on Brian Wilson and that sort of vein of rock and roll, and then even going into Donald Fagen's Nightfly debut solo record, his song Maxine is very, very influenced by those harmonies as well.
Some say that we're reckless, they say we're much too young.
It's amazing that despite this record coming out in 1955, it kind of has continued in decades following.
Freshman,
And
recorded maxi too.
Yeah. Yeah, I was listening to that earlier today. Really, really cool. I love their rendition of it.
Some say that we're reckless. They say we're much too young.
And you know, and it may seem like the influence stops there, but have you ever listened to Jacob Collier?
I've heard the name, but I haven't heard any of his music.
He, kind of got his start. He would make a lot of these like very huge vocal arrangement videos of himself on YouTube where, he'd record like 10 plus, tracks of himself doing all these crazy harmonies. And he'd do like covers of pop songs. Like he did the Flintstones theme song, but it was, when you hear it, you can really, I don't know if he had ever listened to the Four Freshmen, but it sounds just like those records to me.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. They're a modern Stone Age family. Stone Age family.
I really appreciate this album because it still to me feels really relevant and influential.
Well, and Five Trombones, I think another reason for its impact on Freshman fans, it was their first 12-inch album. And at the time, the 12-inch records were really starting. They took the place of 10-inch albums, and you could have a whole theme for and of course Sinatra doing his legendary concept albums. And I think this album really struck a chord with audiences who wanted. It's like, wow, I can listen to the Freshmen on a continuous theme for 40 minutes instead of having to put on this single and then that single.
I suppose with that too, it's also that thing of, I see it with so many bands and artists, that sort of sophomore record where, sometimes, that first album, it has that amazing energy of like, okay, this is our first attempt at something, and it has that power, and they're really conveying their, first message out to the world. But sometimes it's really that sophomore record where, okay, they've received some feedback from the masses or whatever, and now they can really like dial in their sound, and perhaps they have more funding from the label to, really get a cohesive thing together. So with what you just said, it makes sense, and it kind of creates that synergy of that really impactful record.
Yeah, and their follow-up album after this one was Four Freshmen and Five Trumpets. Followed that with Five Saxes. So they kind of got a five, and they did a couple years later they did Five Guitars.
Honestly, that covers all of what I wanted to talk about with this record. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to meet with me and talk about the Four Freshmen. All right, so now we're going to transition to my talk with Bob Ferreira. He sings their fourth part and has been with the band since 1992. He's their longest standing member, and I am really excited to share that conversation with you. So let's get into it. What's your earliest memory of music?
Of music? Well, I actually didn't start playing music or doing any kind of thing musically until I was in high school. So I started late, actually, a product of the 80s. So I was in high school. It was about in 85. I was a sophomore in high school, and a bunch of buddies, we wanted to get a band together, and we all had mullets and all that good stuff. And so they were like, let's like, okay, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do some AC/DC and Kiss and all that other stuff, and our favorite bands at the time. And I said, oh, cool. I said, yeah, I want to play bass. And they're like, oh, well, no, Pete's playing bass, man. It's like, why don't you be the drummer? I'm like, okay, cool. So I bought
Awesome.
this beater $50 drum set from a high school friend, and we just started jamming away. And then it wasn't until my junior year in high school when we said, hey, we want to get our lead vocalist kind of familiar with, getting some voice lessons. So let's all join the choir. And so we ended up joining the choir in high school, and it really changed my life. I opened my ears up to a lot of a lot of different styles of music that I wasn't familiar with: choral music,
Mm.
opera, vocal jazz, that kind of thing. Even though I was raised on my parents' record collection, which was, Frankie Lane, Frank Sinatra, Julie London,
Mm.
Nat King Cole. So we listened to a lot of that stuff growing up. So I was very familiar with the style. At least, I didn't think much of it as a kid, but
Yeah.
it really made me gain an appreciation for that. And it was in joining these vocal jazz choirs, and it really, I had a wonderful teacher who really inspired me a lot. And so basically went through that, went to college, community college, and sang in a vocal jazz group there called Sensation. This is up in
Cool.
Washington State. And the director of that vocal group was, his name is Kirk Marcy, and he was a member of the Four Freshmen for about a year.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So when the time came, I transferred to go for a degree in music education at Central Washington University, and I was there for a year. I came back for an audition committee to be on an audition committee for Soundstation, and he asked, say, hey, might have a gig for you. The freshmen are looking for a drummer, and I'm like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
So, and I had seen the Freshmen perform a couple times. We hosted them at a jazz festival we put together for high schools and stuff, a big festival up in Washington. And so they flew me down to Vegas for like 4 hours, sang through some stuff. Next thing you know, I said, well, I'll try it for a year or two, see if I like it. And that was 33 years ago.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's incredible. And so had you heard any Four Freshmen albums before that, or any of their music, or it wasn't until you became connected with that former member that you were exposed to their music?
Yeah, I was in high school. We were performing, our high school vocal jazz group was performing in Vancouver, British Columbia at a vocal jazz festival. And the Four Freshmen were the headliners that night. And I was in the very, very back against the wall of this packed performing arts center watching them perform. And Kirk Marcy was in the group at the time. This was right when he was, that 1 year he was in the group. Yeah. And I thought it was very cool. I mean, not only the fact that they're a vocal group that sings this amazing harmony, but the fact that they all played instruments, which is something still very unique to any kind of a vocal group, especially with this intricate type of harmony that we do. So being able to play drums and sing and ask that, it was quite an experience.
What are your thoughts on Four Freshmen, Five Trombones specifically? Like, I know when I talked to Christian, he mentioned the set of yours that he had just seen you guys play on tour. You played 4 songs from that record specifically. So is that something that you find pulling from yourself pulling from in your repertoire quite a bit, or?
Oh, absolutely. 1955 was when the album came out, and it's considered probably it was the most popular album the Freshmen ever put out. When that came out, it's very unique. I mean, you don't think of Five Trombones, as being something that would accompany, but the fact that the Four Freshmen modeled their vocal sound after the Stan Kenton trombone section, it makes complete sense. And a lot of these trombone players were Kenton alum. So we would always end up pulling songs from that album because the way it's recorded is just amazing. I mean, Capitol recordings, especially in the 50s like that, it's unlike anything else. And so we did that, and we actually, in 2009, it was such a popular thing, we actually recorded a live version of that, and actually I have it here. It's called The Four Freshmen and Live Trombones. And we recorded that with 5 trombone players in the LA area and a great rhythm section, and we recreated most of the songs that were on that original recording, as well as a few more recent arrangements that were adapted and arranged for 5 trombones as well. So we honor that legacy all the time. The fact that album was the one that Brian Wilson heard from the Beach Boys and credits as being a real inspiration for him. So absolutely, we do that. I mean, the arrangements are amazing. Pete Rugolo, the arranger,
incredible.
The style, everything about it was just phenomenal.
I was telling Christian, it's something usually, I mean, every now and then, you have a band or artist and they really like nail it on their first record, but I find I always kind of end up gravitating towards sort of sophomore records, which I guess maybe is a little bit ironic for the Four Freshmen with the name, but like it really is that thing of, they learned from the first record, and it really is that full kind of like realization of sort of their sound. And like you were mentioning too, that the trombones, like just the fact that, you can really just glissando anywhere you want with a trombone and really get that sort of closest to a sort of, bending notes that a human voice can do really fits perfectly. And moving forward into what the Four Freshmen are doing now, like if you had to like describe what sort of defines the Four Freshmen sound, what is there anything you would sort of say specifically? Like maybe you can get as theoretical as you want or as not theoretical as you want with that.
Well, the Four Freshmen, even to this day, it continues to be a unique style of harmony. The Four Freshmen, and I don't know if Christian mentioned this. So when the freshmen started, they were four freshmen in college, and they would be singing a lot of solo tunes and barbershop, but they wanted to kind of branch out and do their own thing, and they wanted to sing the pop songs of the time, which we consider nowadays as the Great American Songbook, right?
Yeah.
So they would sit around a guitar and they would say, okay, Ken Ferreira was the original bass singer. He's not on the five trombones. Hal Cratch. Ken Herrera's on the five trombones. Hal Cratch was the original bass singer and the founder of the group. But they would sit around and say, okay, you sing this note, you sing this note, you sing this note. And they would sing it, and they play through chord by chord and learn it all by ear, which to me is amazing when you listen to some of these what we refer to as Group 1, the late 40s, early 50s arrangements that were not written down. And we do a few of those on our show to honor that, because they're just fun arrangements. But they would just sit around and do that. And so when they finally got discovered, it took them a while to kind of build up a repertoire of harmony arrangements, four-part arrangements, when they would incorporate solo tunes in between. When they went to Capitol Records, they were really fortunate to have wonderful arrangers like Dick Reynolds and Pete Rugolo, who would come in and arrange some of these songs for them in a style that kind of took their sound to the next level. So, but one of the defining factors of the Freshmen were that it was pretty much one of the first male vocal groups where the melody was sung on the high tenor part, which very unusual at that time, because usually that part was either sung by a female, or in barbershop the melody was sung by the second tenor, and that's traditional barbershop style. So Bob Flanagan was the original lead singer, who really brought that in. He had such a unique voice, his tone, his personality, everything just oozed out of those arrangements, and I think that really brought something there. So the harmony, the Freshmen would take these chords, these songs, and they would take the most colorful notes of those chords and really utilize them. So they would leave out some of the notes, like the fifth of the chord. They would maybe just leave that out and just get these chords where they just buzz. And to be able to do that and have that ear to be able to tune those things up was really something. So I would say, definitely one of those defining factors, the melody on the top, and taking those juiciest notes in the chord and making it sound like it's more than four people singing.
Especially on the Five Trombones record, it really, to me, it mimics so much of, like, we talked about Barney Kessel, like it just feels like it is sort of just like a guitar chord melody, but instead it's this like massive projection of human voices instead, which is so cool to me. And as you touched on earlier with the Brian Wilson influence, like I was reading, and he kind of did the same thing where he poured over this record and learned every part kind of note by note and deconstructed it and reconstructed it, which, you can just totally hear that influence on all of those Beach Boy records.
Absolutely. One thing that was also another defining factor is that, as mentioned, all these guys were instrumentalists.
Mm.
along with being vocalists.
Yeah.
But the way they approached the music were not necessarily as a vocal group would, but as four horn players would approach
Mm.
singing those parts. And so it was a very different than when you listen to the high-lows or the four aces or the four lads. It's very, you'll notice a lot of vocal arrangements. Most of the songs, you hear very little vibrato out of the voices.
Yeah.
And that's because if you have singing no vibrato and you're singing these four parts, and when that chord locks up, it will ring. Vibrato will kind of get rid of that, because those wavelengths are not syncing up completely.
Yeah.
So you'd hear a little vibrato out of Bob Flanagan on the high part towards the end of a phrase, but for the most part, it was very straight tone, so it was all about making those chords ring. And in regards to Brian Wilson, it's funny because I was just talking to somebody the other day. He actually mentions this in his book. He mentions me by name in his book, which was quite an honor and a wonderful story. He had come to see us a couple times perform several years back. And the first time was in Palm Desert, California at the McAllen Center. We were performing there. And it was the first time he had seen the Freshmen since the 50s. And this was the early 2000s. And he walked up to me in the hallway and he says, "You guys sound effing great." And then he just turned and walked away. And it was amazing. But there was another time we were in Newport Beach, California, performing at this yacht club area, and it was outside overlooking Balboa Bay, and we would do it every year. And Bob Flanagan was around then, and so he would always bring people in to come see the group. Like Glenn Campbell came to see us, who was a big fan of the group, and then he brought Brian Wilson, and we did our first half. And then we did a song for him that he absolutely loves called Little Girl Blue, a nice ballad. And so during the intermission, he comes into our dressing room area and, says hi. And he says, "Hey, I wonder if you guys could really do me a favor. If I could sing the fourth part, which is the bass part, my part, on the intro to Little Girl Blue, I would absolutely love it." We're like, "Absolutely, sure."
Yeah.
So he's sitting in there and he's singing this intro with the other guys singing Little Girl Blue. And it was really a magical moment because in the book, he says their hearts were full of spring, but it was actually Little Girl Blue. But the great thing was that when you see Brian Wilson, when you would see him talk about the Freshmen, sing the four Freshmen stuff, play through it, he was like a 15-year-old again. And for somebody, an artist of his stature, to reach the heights that he had reached in his career and dealt with all the trials and tribulations throughout his career, to still hold on to that childhood magic in that kid in a candy store feel whenever he heard or talked about the four Freshmen is very rare. And it's a true testament to the power of this legacy of the Freshman sound and the impact it had on not just artists but people who would just listen to it at the time. So to see him light up like a 15-year-old anytime he talked about it or sang with us, it was a real treat to see.
The other thing that I think is more unique about the four Freshmen is this sort of like cycling in and out of new members throughout its entire career, because I've seen in certain bands like, okay, yeah, maybe one member passes away or something and they'll, bring in someone new if they do a reunion tour or something like that. But I'm curious as to what your insights are as to sort of why the four Freshmen have kept the name going throughout all these decades, and if there was a particular reason for that.
That's a great question, actually, because, nowadays we kind of equate the four Freshmen to being more like a sports team. So when you think about a sports team, the players change over the years, but the organization stays the same. Yeah. And so, you don't necessarily go and try to see the original Boston Red Sox because they're not around. So whenever a member would leave, a new member would come in, and that's been the way since about 52, when Hal Cratch left the group to kind of settle down and start a family, and Ken Herrera came in, and that's when they made 4 freshmen, 5 trombones. So it's been kind of that process, that lineage has always been, whenever somebody leaves, we've been very fortunate to find somebody who can come in, sing, play, and as important, has the passion for the sound and the attitude to continue the sound and in such a positive way. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. We've never had anybody die while in the group, but you know, people just, they either want to get off the road, for whatever reason it is, they want to move on. And I've been through plenty of personnel changes over my years, but I'll tell you what, every member who has come in, whether it's been for 3 months or 20 years, has been a positive one in the fact that it's helped perpetuate the legacy of the group. They've added their own individual aspects of creativity to the sound. The sound is never going to be exactly like it was with the early groups, or even in the groups in the 70s or 80s or even 90s. The harmony itself is, you know, we lends itself to what we hear as far as 4 freshmen goes. But you know, everybody's voices are different, and so we always strive to sound as together and as much like the 4 freshmen as we do, but we don't try to ever imitate groups of the past, because I think in the end it's like we are all defining our own chapters in the lineage of this group.
And I suppose, like, building on that, what are sort of your hopes for the 4 Freshmen's legacy as you guys continue to move forward these days?
Well, you know, I mean, obviously we always want to be working more. The market and the industry has changed so much in these last years, and it's more of a challenge with an older group. People think, oh, the 4 Freshmen, that's some 50s band. It's like, well, we're a little more than that. I'm the old man of the group. I'm 55. But you know, we just had our newest member, Chris Peters, who sings the lead part, is going to be 26, and so you know, we have this generation, a younger generation of people who are still very passionate about this sound. All we can hope is that we continue to spread the values of and the knowledge of what this sound and what this group has meant to the music industry, to the people who listen to it, the stories that we hear about how people fell in love listening to the 4 Freshmen and got married, and their whole lives has spent you know, just cherishing those memories and that nostalgia of the music. But we also continue to put out new recordings, because we don't want to just rely on the songs of the past and the memories of the past. We want to create new ones, and so we still do. I mean, we just released a new album. Actually, I have it right here. I can't really see it, but it's called The 4 Freshmen, featuring Emmett Cohen, Russell Hall, and Kyle Poole, and that's volume 2. And Emmett Cohen is an amazing jazz pianist, and his trio backed us up, and we recorded basically 2 volumes of songs. And so we just released this. We just released a single of a song, "I'll Be Happy," and that was the very first recording the 4 Freshmen ever did in the late 40s. It was their first single, and it featured Hal Cratch on singing the first half of the tune. He's the bass singer, and just amazing voice. I'm still jealous. And we do that, and we just released that with Chris singing the lead part, honoring the legacy of the group, but at the same time defining ourselves in that legacy.
Honestly, that really encapsulates everything that I wanted to talk about today. I suppose, you know, if there's anything you want to sort of plug right now that is going on with the 4 Freshmen, you know, please feel free to share anything you guys got in the works right now. Or
Yeah, so anybody who's interested in maybe keeping up on what the Freshmen are doing, they can go to any one of those social media platforms, check us out, and we just hope we get to see all of everybody who's listening and watching, maybe come out to see a show, because it's a lot of fun. We just have a great time. We're, there's no pyrotechnics or anything, but what we do is bring you just the best that we can bring, and we have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
No, Sam, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time and helping honor the tradition of the Freshmen.
All right, so there it is. That's the end of the video. I really hope that you all go and listen to that record. It is such an incredible piece of history, and if you're interested in listening to the Four Freshmen's contemporary music and want to connect with them on social media, see what they have going on currently, catch them on tour, buy their records, I'll have links to all of the information and sites for that down below in the description. And I just wanted, again, to extend my deepest gratitude to Bob and Christian for speaking with me. And I also wanted to shout out their trumpet player, Jake Baldwin. He was the first person who got back to me when I was reaching out to everyone to hopefully schedule some interviews, and he put me in touch with Bob, who then put me in touch with Christian. So yeah, thank you all, and I hope you'll all give the Four Freshmen a listen. And if you're interested in speaking with me more about the album, or have any ideas for albums I listen to moving forward with this, or just want to connect with me over music or mastering, you can reach out to me in the contact information in the description down below.